Are you? Good work.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Good morning. We're going to spend the first couple minutes just admitting everybody, so just be patient for just a minute longer, please. Letting everybody in. And I see that Todd's in, so I'm going to ask Todd to come on. Hello. Good morning, Todd.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and
No.
clear.
All right.
So I want to welcome everybody. We're still a minute before the hour and people are still logging in. So we'll have a minute or two before we get started.
Can you hear me, Erica?
Yes.
Great. And the sound okay?
Yeah, I think so. Anyone else having
Is
any audio challenges?
this sound even better?
It's a little, I don't know. I don't know if I'd say better.
All right.
I'm just removing note takers at this point because I have like thousands of note taker requests. This is being recorded, everybody. All right. So, good morning, everybody. It's the top of the hour, so I do want to get started and be respectful of your time. So, welcome. My name is Erica Peterson. I am the state director for the California Association of Supervisors of Child Welfare and Attendance, otherwise known as CASWA. And today's webinar is brought to you by the Superintendent's Council, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in just a moment. Um, as folks are joining, writing for busy families. So let me start with just telling you a little bit about CASQUA. And I'm toggling back and forth between letting people in and telling you and trying to talk at the same time. So forgive me for any awkward pauses. But California, CASQUA is an organization made up of folks, school folks and community professionals who are dedicated to improving school climate, safety, and school attendance, right? We're the ones who get kids to school and hopefully keep them there. We are a statewide professional organization with a state board as well as 4 regional sections so that we provide local learning opportunities in addition to these large scale webinars. So you can see on the map here the different regions. You can find yours. And in the chat, let's have you test the chat as to what section of CASQUA you are a part of. So if you can plug that into the chat, we'll know your chat feature is working. In CASQUA, we do things a little informally. We love member engagement. So this is set up as a Zoom meeting. You can put your questions in the chat. Emily is going to be moderating the chat for us today while Todd is presenting. And so we welcome your questions and your participation. So thank you for joining us. A little bit more about us. If you're not a CASWA member, join us. Dues are only $125 for the year. We provide professional development throughout the year with webinars, in-person trainings, all kinds of things. We have an annual statewide conference that comes every spring. You can go to our website. This QR code will take you there to learn more about us. A little bit about the Superintendent's Council, who's the host for today's webinar. It's a statewide advisory body to strengthen the connection between CASQUA and California superintendents. We hope that we make your lives easier by helping executive leadership understand exactly the challenges that you face in the work that you do every day. And so we have created this council to be that intersection and voice bi-directionally. So we are made up of diverse superintendents and executive leaders from across the state and private sector. With that, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Everyday Labs for underwriting today's Superintendent's Council webinar. If you're not familiar with Everyday Labs, they partner with school districts across the country and provide them with a game plan for better attendance and student outcomes. They do this through actionable data, analytics, col- uh, collaboration tools, evidence based communications, and professional learning that builds capacity for attendance improvement. And I'd like to introduce our speaker today. And Todd, feel free to fill in any blanks. But Todd Rogers is an academic behavioral scientist, entrepreneur, and author. He's the Weatherhead Professor of Policy at Harvard Kennedy School. And at the Harvard Kennedy School, he's the Faculty Director of Behavioral Insights and the Behavioral Insights Group and the founding director of the Social Connection and Sports Fandom Initiative at Harvard. Todd is also the co-founder and chief scientist at Everyday Labs. So welcome, Todd, and thank you for presenting today's content.
Thank you. Hi, Erica. Hi, everybody. Good to see some familiar names and faces in there. I hope we can talk at the end. First, can I confirm, Erica, since you're talking, you can hear me okay? I got to
Yes.
figure out what's going on with the headphones. So,
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
but this works. You can hear me.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Thank you. And I like you got the sports fandom initiative. That's new. That's my new research.
Oh,
Uh,
fun.
on how we can use sports fandom to build connection between people and groups. So I am going to share my slides here. And again, since Erica, you are my spoken voice, you can see this the way it's supposed to be presented.
I think so. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Um, welcome. So, what we're going to talk about, it's going to be very interactive. And for the next 35 or 40 minutes, I will be sharing some of these best practices and we'll be doing interactions and whatnot. And at the end, we'll have some questions. But I want to start with I started working on this work through thinking about how do we communicate with busy families. And I started doing work on reducing absenteeism in K-12 school districts. You guys may know some of the work through the Everyday Labs and basically like printed letters reminding people of their students' total absences, especially compared to their classmates across 14 different randomized experiments, including lots in California and published papers. It reduces chronic absenteeism district-wide by 10 to 15% at a cost of like 1/50th or 1/100th the next best interventions. Everyday Labs does something like 25 million of these interventions a year for districts around the country. And Emily Orngard is on the call right now to work with us to answer questions about that. I am chief scientist for them now, and I am presenting to you now, I think in that capacity. We'll say that even though
Mm-hmm.
it says it's at Harvard. So I'll get the Harvard logo off that page or the Harvard name, and I'll just say I'm via Everyday Labs as chief scientist. So this work is based on a book that Jessica Lasky Fink and I wrote, where we were like, there are these common themes for effective communication with busy families. I've also worked on voters. I've also worked on energy consumption. I've also worked on exercise. I've also worked on saving money. And across all of them, there are these common themes. And Jessica and I decided to write a book about the 5 or 6, depending on how you count, principles for the science of how do you write so busy people read, respond, and understand. The TLDR, and I see David Copperwood in here, he's seen this before, and we've talked about it for years, uh, is that everyone is skimming everything we send them. Every parent is busy and they are all skimming. And so if we want them to read and respond, we need to make it as easy as possible to skim. So if we were in person, I would start with raise your hand if you've ever been in a meeting with either a staff member, a teammate, or a family, and a question is asked, and the answer to the question is in the thing that you sent them in advance, right? You put all this time and energy into writing this thing in advance, and then a question comes, and you're like, wait, I don't understand. Didn't you read the thing? We've all been in this situation. I bet many of you have sent emails where someone replies to the email with a question where the answer to the question is in the email they're replying to. And like you're tempted to have like down as your response. It's in the email. We've all been there. The idea is everyone is skimming. And if they're asking a question where it was in the thing that we sent, we normally think it's on them that they failed to read it. And we did our job by writing and sending it to them. But a radical take on this is what if it's always our fault if they didn't read? It's a lot like when we teach kids. If they don't learn math in our math class, we assume that it is our job to make sure they're learning it. It is not enough to lecture at them if they're not getting it. So what if it was on us when we send them something and they don't read it? Well, how would we write differently? We write so that it's as easy as possible for them to get the info out of. That's like the sort of radical take. What if it was on us if they don't read it? Then we would write in a way that makes it a lot easier to get the info. I want you to use the chat now. So what do you write? For what reasons do you write? You write emails to staff and parents. You write newsletters. You write incident reports, maybe. What else? Enter in the chat. Let's see what are some examples of things that we write. Practical writing that we do. I'm entering the chat. I'm looking at there we go. I see the list. Here we go. Let's enter in the chat. What are some things that we write? Anyone who's here? Good. There we go. Social media posts, emails, charts, mass communications. Yeah, exactly. Announcements. Thanks, Hugo. Any bulletin reminders? Yes. Text to parents and emails? Yes. Are you listed emails, presentations, newsletters, social media posts? Awesome. So these are all practical writing. It's not poetry. It's not literature. It is writing where we have the narrow singular objective of conveying information from us to the reader. That's what we're talking about. That's the kind of writing we're talking about. That's what we're going to be talking about, how to write more effectively, that stuff. So I would, I, we've all had this experience where we look at emails and we decide some get dealt with and some get postponed. You all have probably this morning looked at lots of emails and replied to some and not others. So, other than the sender or subject line, right? So, different senders get responses, different subject lines get responses. What are the attributes of the text? Enter in the chat. What are the attributes of the text that make some messages get dealt with now and others get postponed for later? So when you look at a message, you're like, I'm going to respond now, or I'm going to postpone that for later. And often later becomes never. What are the attributes? Okay, so Hugo says if it's easy to read, bullets are concise. Good. What you look at a big thing, there it is, short or long. Good. What are the attributes? You look at it, you're like, I'm going to deal with that now, or I'm going to deal with that later. What are some other attributes? We've got length. We've got whether it's skimmable with bullets. So Selena says if we can figure out what the point is. Sometimes it'll be like 4 paragraphs and I don't know what it's about. Good. How much time it's going to take to process? Great, Jennifer says, which is uh, if I look at it, I skimmed it, I got the key info, and I have to do some research to figure out what the answer is. I got to talk to somebody. I've got to talk to some teachers or district leaders. I've got to do some research reading. I've got to write carefully. Those are going to get delayed. Great. This is exactly what we commonly see. The idea is anything that requires cognitive effort. It could be time to read, time to understand, time to respond, time to do research. Anything that requires additional effort is more likely to get postponed. And conversely, anything that is easy to respond to, that requires not a lot of effort, is more likely to get dealt with. And so the idea is the more cognitive effort we ask of our reader, that could be the difficulty of writing, it could be the number of steps, it could be the length, all these things, the less likely we are to get dealt with quickly or dealt with at all. Okay, that's exactly what we're expecting. So Jessica and I write this book where the entire point for us is how do we help communicators, you all, be more effective at achieving your goals? But you don't have to think long to realize that in addition to being more effective when you write in a way that's easy to read and respond to. It's also just kinder. So if I was going to send Erica a message at the end of this session, and it's going to take her 5 minutes to deal with, but I could, and she is going to deal with it, but I could have written it in a way that takes her 1 minute. I basically just wasted 4 minutes of her time. In addition to being less likely someone deals with it, even if they do, and it takes extra time, it's just unkind and wasteful. It's also inequitable. So we're going to talk later about the distribution of grade level reading. And 50% of US adults, one half, read at or below a ninth grade reading level. So when we write in ways that are hard to read, people are less likely to read and respond now. If they do read, they're going to waste a lot of time because you could have saved them time. It also is inaccessible to a huge chunk of people that might be readers. One person in a session like this wrote, lengthy or disorganized writing is disrespectful of the reader. I love that take too. Not only is it less effective, it's unkind and disrespectful to write in a way that takes a lot of time and is hard to read. Okay, we're going to get a checklist, a PDF at the end of this, so you don't have to write this down, a one pager, because it's easy to read of these. But we're going to start with the first principle, use enough formatting, but no more. On the next page, I'm going to show you some text. I want you to do the thing that it says in the text, okay? Just do what it says. It's going to say to write something. Here we go, in the chat. 3, 2, 1. The point of this is to show you how powerful formatting is to reinforce your purpose. Do the thing you're reading. I see some people doing it. Good. I see a lot of the Pasqua. Good. So what you did was you jumped to the bold, highlighted text, right? And it says enter in the chat. But if you had read this the way it was written, you would have seen before you get to that text, ignore the instruction below, instead enter we all skim. But nobody did that so far. We're totally normal. We run experiments, we do activities, we have done simulations like this consistently. People interpret bold, underline, and highlight as the writer, in this case me, saying to the reader, in this case you, this is the most important text. I am saying to you, this is the most important text. So you as a reader, because you're busy and you're skimming, jump to that text and you assume I am a benevolent writer. I am directing you to the most important info. And it licenses readers to not read anything else. So when we draw attention to some text, everyone goes to it. Almost everybody. You do these experiments, 100% of people read that. But it decreases their reading of everything else. Whereas if I had not had bold, underline, or highlighted text, you would have been much more likely to actually read this sentence. So the idea, TLDR, too long didn't read, the takeaway on this one is use enough formatting, but no more. There's trade-offs, and this is a common theme you're going to see throughout this. There is not a right answer for how to communicate. You just have to know that the harder it is, or the more time you're demanding, or the longer it is, the less likely people will be to read it at all. Okay. So the next one is designed for navigation, because we step away and we're like, look, the big principle is everyone is skimming. And so how would we write to make it easier for skimmers? We would write in a way that designs the writing, the text, to make it easier to navigate. So we're going to do a little activity right now. I'm going to give you 8 seconds. That's this yellow bar. You see, it looks like a lot of time. It's 8 seconds. Not that much time. But I want you to imagine being you, which is like an important, like busy person doing your job, lots of things, and you're between meetings, right? And I want you to like imagine you get the message I'm about to show you on the next screen. You get it on your phone and you look at it and you're like, okay, I'm going to skim this, figure out what the point is, and then I'm going to move on. And you're going to give it 8 seconds. So I'm going to ask you to spend 8 seconds looking at it. The yellow bar will be on the next screen, and that shows 8 seconds. From there, it's going to automatically advance, and I want you to enter in the chat what you pulled out of the text in that 8 seconds. All you're going to get is 8 seconds. Looks like a lot, but it's not. Here we go. And then I want you to enter in the chat. It's totally fine. It's an impossible task. So don't just enter what you pull out of it. We're going to go 8 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. I promise that was 8 seconds. So now enter in the chat. What did you pull out? Please enter in the chat what you, good. Some kind of cybersecurity. Thank you. A cybersecurity attack. It's being investigated. Wow, you guys had exactly the same writing. Oh, I guess slightly. Okay, good. Same length. Cybersecurity attack. CTO Senate. Right. The CTO Senate. Still investigate. Perfect, perfect. These are all actual facts from that text. Great. So these are all actually in there. And the CTO Senate, it's a cybersecurity incident, and they're busy solving it. So let's just look at it. Basically, up the first 2 or 3 paragraphs is something happened. This is what happened. This is my favorite, like totally realistic part, which is your CTO is saying, we're doing lots of things. Check out our list. Irrelevant to you as a busy person in the middle of your day, but they just want like CYA. We're doing lots of stuff. We're doing lots of stuff. We're trying. And then down at the bottom, you see this. Please immediately reset your password because it's still ongoing. Nobody got that, which is totally normal. Now, what I want is how would we, let's say the lawyers have lawyered this text. So you can't edit the writing, but you can add structure to it. You can add things. How would we revise it where we just design it for navigation, but we're not changing the text? We're just adding structure. How would we improve this? I'm looking for 2 things that we're just going to like overlay on it some structure that will make it easier to skim. What would you add to it? So a couple of ideas of bolding the password. I want to go even stronger. Like what structure could we impose on it? Instead of just highlighting the or bolding, since we did talk about that, you might even move it to the top, like Erica says. Exactly. And Hugo says something similar. Good. And so does Susie. Perfect. That's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do bluff. Anyone here, military, veteran, you know what BLUF stands for? Bluff. Enter it in the chat. Okay. Bluff came from the US Army. It was a regulation. It is a regulation that basically says that any writing in the US Army, the bottom line has to be up front. BLUF, bottom line up front. It's a regulation that anyone writing anything, first line has to be the bottom line. Now it works in the U.S. Army. It is spread across the militaries in the U.S. and around the world, and it's a great norm if it's common for this organizational culture for any given organization. So it helps writers know where to put it. The key info goes up top. It helps readers know where to find it. Key info goes up top, but it especially helps lower status writers because if you're an enlisted person and you're writing to a general, you might in the first paragraph feel like you have to be deferential and say, you know, I've admired your work for so long. We crossed paths in the mess in Kandahar. You may not remember, but we chatted about my high school football team and how your team beat us. I have an urgent matter, right? You might, and in that case, it's less likely to get read. If it does get read, it wastes time and it disadvantages the already lower status writer. So we're going to do bottom line up front. What else can we do to add structure to a message that has a lot of text, but we want people to jump around? What can we add to it, overlay on it a structure? Enter in the chat if you have a suggestion. We're going to like put a structuring to it. So I think it's possible that what ELDA means with bullet points is we're going to add headings. We're going to do bluff and headings. Now check out how these things look different. Look at how this letter is going to look different when we add headings We basically are designing to be navigated. Same text. And all we've done is we added a bluff and structure so they can jump around. The lawyers have lawyered it. We can't change it with the text, but we can add this overlay to make it navigable. Now, this was the original, and this is the designed for navigation version. You can see the idea is if we add a round of editing at the end when we're done with the original and say, okay, how would I make this easier for a skimmer? You just add structure and so much easier. On the checklist, there'll be 6 different strategies for this. We talked about 2, a bottom line up front and headings, but there are 4 others. I mean, it's just the idea is how do we make it easier for a reader? Because here it'd be so much easier to jump around. Okay, that was 2. 3, which is my favorite, is less is more. You may know this quote that is often attributed to every clever person who's ever been alive, from Mark Twain to Albert Einstein. It was actually a French mathematician from the 17th century named Blaise Pascal, wrote in a letter, I'm sorry this letter is so long. I would have written a shorter one if I'd had more time. I'm sorry this letter is so long. I would have written a shorter one if I'd had more time. Now, I love that because it says 2 things. It is worthy of apology that I have burdened you with all these words. I'm sorry I wrote so much.
Saying that you should put your message in the first line.
Uh, somebody is unmuted.
Child is listening for 2 days.
Can David, we're gonna
Don't put
mute
it in
you.
the bottom line.
There we go. Okay. Uh, I'm sorry this letter is so long. I would have written a shorter one if I'd had more time. It takes more time to write less, and it's worthy of apology that I wrote so much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, I'm probably going to show you 2 experiments, but we've run dozens. It's never been the case that more is more likely to be read. So this is an experiment I ran with Jessica where we scraped 7,000 school board member email addresses. Many of the school board members are in California. Where I just I wrote them an email saying, hey, I'm a professor. I know you're doing important work that's profoundly impacting lives. You're busy. You're balancing competing interests. Your participation would be really helpful. Will you please fill out my stupid survey? Half of them get that, randomly assigned. The other half get this one, where I just delete all the middle sentences and say, hey, I'm a professor. I'd really like to learn from you. Would you please fill out my stupid survey? And we hire a couple hundred people to read both and predict which one will be more effective. Now, the vast majority of people think the more deferential, respectful, longer one will be more effective. But you already know this is called less is more. So you already know what the result is going to be, which is that we get a 78% increase in response rate when we cut it down by 2/3. There's an organization here at Harvard called the Journalist Resource, where it's a network of 50,000 journalists. And every week, the Journalist Resource sends them a newsletter with links to relevant literature scholarship on news of the day. Now, the idea here is they want to make it easier for journalists to be able to use scholarship without having to become experts. And so they send them this, they write their first draft, and they're professional journalists, they're writers. They reach out to me and they say, hey, we wrote our first draft. We think it's good. This is good. We're done. What experiment would you want to run? So I say, okay, you have 30 minutes. Get back to me with a shortened version that's half as long. They thought they were done. And now they have an original, which was their version they were going to send, and a concise one. And then they do the experiment. 25,000 get randomly assigned to original, 25,000 get randomly assigned to concise. The result, 94% more journalists use the one that was half as long as they planned to send. Almost doubles the success rate of their newsletter. So far, we've talked about 2 kinds of less is more. Fewer words. In order to should just be 2. The reason for this can just be because. It's just easier to read, no information lost. The second kind is fewer ideas. We just have to know that there's a trade-off. At every turn, there's a trade-off. The more we add, the less likely someone is to read. Those who do read will get more info. But we just have to know that everything we add decreases the likelihood that they read and the number of people who actually do read. So we have to balance these things. Now, the third kind of less is more is fewer requests. We and others have run a bunch of experiments showing that when you add additional requests, you decrease the chance that any one of them gets done. Which is, if I have one important request and two others, adding the two others decreases the chance people will do the one important one. So the idea is just less is more. The more we ask of people, the less likely they are to do it, and the less likely they are to do all of it. When we talk about less is more, there's fewer words, fewer ideas, fewer requests. And again, there is no right answer because sometimes you have to make multiple requests. It is what it is. But we just have to know that there's a trade-off at every turn. The fourth is make reading easy. Now, what does that mean? You're all in this education space. So that means shorter words are easier to read than longer words. Familiar words are easier to read than unfamiliar words. Simpler, shorter sentences are easier to read than long sentences. And that's one of my favorite new things that I learned while doing research for the book. This incredible work on eye tracking, where they'll like lock people's faces in, and then they'll watch. I mean, these are volunteers, and then they'll watch their eyes as they read word, 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 period. And then at the period, people just sit because that's how we're taught to read. The period means the idea is over. And the longer the sentence, the longer the period pause. The longer the sentence, the more likely readers are to go back and reread. Now, as soon as you add that kind of additional cognitive effort, that's when people quit on you. And so the idea is you want to make it so they go word, 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 period, word, 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 period, and just go through it quickly. Because if you add cognitive effort, that's when people quit. And then obviously, if you can write in the language people prefer to read it. So at Everyday Labs, Emily, you can enter, I think it's 3, 4, 5 languages that the interventions are sent in. I work with lots of districts through Everyday Labs and otherwise. It ends up being hard to get new information translated into all these languages, but obviously it's preferred by people who prefer to read in one language. This is that table I was referring to in the very beginning, that the US reading level of adults, 50% read at a 9th grade reading level. 1 in 5 US adults reads at or below a 5th grade reading level. So when we send text that is hard to read, we are inaccessible to a large fraction of our families, and especially our most vulnerable families. So not only is it more effective, it's also more accessible. Okay, I did a project with Hedy Chang from Attendance Works and Jessica Lasky-Fink, my co-author on this book, and Carly Robinson, who's at Stanford, on where we were working with the Attorney General in California, and I think David might have been involved in the early days of this. I know that we've shared this with the SARB, where this is when Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of California, and we got permission to rewrite this notice of truancy. And you guys will recognize this. This is the one of the versions of the California notice of truancy. I'm going to read it to you. It goes to families of kids who miss 3 days or more, or are late 3 days or more, like most families in California. And it is written, the goal is to get kids to go to school more. But listen to the first 2 lines are it's not written for easy reading. It's hardly even written for humans. It's just written for lawyers, who are people too, but not normal writing. Here it is. California Education Code Section 48260 provides that a pupil, child, subject to compulsory full-time education or to compulsory continuation education. I mean, like if the goal was to actually be understood, you would write in a way that makes it easy to understand. So the reason we needed the AG's permission, and we did this in LA Unified, we did this giant experiment with 131,000 families, where we just wrote it in a 5th grade reading level, smaller font, smaller, fewer words, bigger font, in a box, We had the state mandated language in smaller font. And you can tell, like, we want you to read what's in the box. And so then we run this giant experiment in LA, and we look at what happens to attendance over the next 30 days with the different letters. And of course, any letter is going to have a small effect, especially one that is, so compliance driven and not designed to be optimally effective. But what we found is that the easier to read version was 40% more effective than the original version. If we're going to write to people, we may as well write in a way that's easy to understand. And it turns out that's much more effective. This QR code, Hetty and I wrote a blog post at Attendance Works on how to get this into your district. And I know that the SARB and others have been pushing this. Please do update your districts, get your friends, family, collaborators, colleagues, everybody to just change the notice of truancy. It's pretty easy to do, just straightforwardly. I know Everyday Labs works with a lot of you to actually send these. So now we're going to do another activity. This is a real sign in a real park in the United States. It won a real award called the WTF Award, given by the Center for Plain Language. It says, persons shall remove all excrement from pets, pursuant to some law. Let's say I'm walking my dog. I don't know what those words mean. I'm not going to read. It's useless. I'm walking my dog. I do know what those words mean, but when it says persons shall remove, it's clearly not something I want to do while I'm walking my dog in a park. So I'm not going to read. It's hard to imagine how this is useful. What I want you to enter in the chat, how would you rewrite this sign to make it more effective? How would you write this sign to make it more effective? Enter in the chat what you might say in this sign. Enter in the chat how you might rewrite this. Okay, good, Hugo. There's one. I'm sure you have lots of creative ideas. Let's do it. Pick up your dog poop. It's the law. Good. Mo, I'm fishing. Okay. How would you write this more simply? This award-winning sign. The WTF award, just to be clear, is words that failed. WTF. This is one from the Center for Plain Language. Yeah, so Jennifer asked, could we use a picture? Good question. We'll get to that in a second, but for now, we're going to do the words. Good. You must pick up your pet. All of these are so much better. Barbara's, by law, you're responsible. All of them. Christie's, you must pick up your pet. Good. These are all so much better than this award-winning sign. So this is what Jessica and I come up with here in the book. No idea whether yours are all just as good. Scoop your pet's poop. Notice we use font size to draw attention to that. We assume you're supposed to include the law number, even though no one cares. So we put that in small font. Yours would be just as good. Jennifer asks, could you just use a picture? Now, I have a student who moved back to Paris after being here at the Kennedy School of Government. And she sent me this picture, which I just love. It's from a sign in a park in Paris. Now, I don't read French, but if you assume that this upside down wine glass here is a shovel, then it's pretty self-evident without even reading it that I'm supposed to scoop my pet's poop. And I see a little euro sign. I assume that means there's a fine. How do you make it easiest to understand? You don't even need to be literate in the language. The sign is even easier to read. This is a modified New Yorker cartoon that I really like, which is basically the devil reviewing the work of an underling and says, this form is wordy, it's complex, it's hard to navigate, and it presents as a wall of words. I am very impressed. It is just unkind to write in a way that is hard for people to read. In addition to being less effective, it's just unkind. That's the fourth, make reading easy. The fifth and last principle is make responding easy. So I want you to enter in the chat. Imagine that you have an easy task and a hard task that both have to get done by the end of today. The easy task is going to take 20 seconds, and the hard task is going to take 30 minutes. The 20 seconds, both have to get done today. 20 seconds and 30 minutes. Which one are you going to do first? Enter in the chat which one you're going to do first. The 20-second task first or the 30-minute task? 20 seconds first or 30 minutes first? We, consistent with every time we've ever studied this, those of you who are interested in behavioral economics, Christy, you have to do it. You have to do the 20-second one. You have two things you have to do: 20-second task and a 30-minute task. Which one goes first? Anyone who's interested in behavioral economics, this is called present bias. It's kind of procrastination. The vast majority of people, almost always 90% or more, will do the easy task first. And so when we are asking people to do stuff, we want them to do it now, and we want them to do it, but we also want them to do it now. And often when we postpone doing things, tomorrow becomes never. So the easier we make it for people, the more likely they will be to actually do it. We want to make complex things simple. Now, how do you do that? It depends on context. That's like this recurring part of this. It depends. But the idea is, how do you make it easy? Whatever it means. It could mean pre-populating forms. Now, I was working with a school district that has a Navy base in the district. And some of you probably are familiar with this, that if there are people who live on base in your district, they are entitled to attend your district schools, but they don't pay property taxes. And so the district gets reimbursed by the US Pentagon for these kids attending the district. But the family has to fill out a one-page form first. And as you can imagine, it's hard to get families to fill out forms. And it's worth a lot of money to the district. And so I was working with this district that has a Navy base, Ledyard School District in Connecticut. And what they did was they pre-populated the form, because we already know all this information from last year. They filled it out for the family, and then they sent it home with the kid. And they reduced the number of non-returned forms by 2/3. The idea is we could pre-populate the form. We could reduce the number of steps when we are asking people to enroll in things, in enrollment in the school year, or whatever else we're asking them to enroll in. If we reduce the number of steps or reduce the friction, checklists, we could change the default. We could, as Jennifer Palka, who wrote this book, Recoding America, wrote. She wrote this great book. She was the first chief digital officer of the US. And in the book, she said, complexity favors the sophisticated, which I love. The idea is that the harder things are, the more you are going to deter less sophisticated participants. And so when I work with the Office of Management Budget in the executive branch, they have all these like programs that states and cities and organizations can apply for. And what they find is that often the small cities or the small organizations don't apply. It's because it's an 80-page application. And their interest is in simplifying the application to increase the number of applicants in general, but specifically to pull in the less sophisticated applicants, because complexity favors the sophisticated. So the idea is, for this fifth one, is if it's important for us, we want to make it easy for them. If it's important for us, we want to make it easy for them. How we do that? Lots of different strategies. But if it's important for us, we want to make it easy for them. Okay, so the TLDR, as we move to close, and we'll take some questions in about 3 minutes, is that we want to add a round of editing to everything we write, where we ask ourselves, how do I make it easier for the reader? How do I make it easier for the reader? Because when we make it easier for readers, we are more effective at achieving our goals. It's also kinder to our readers. It saves them time, and it's more accessible to more readers. How do I make it easier for the reader? Now, Emily, if you could enter in the chat the checklist. I'll also include a QR code in a second, and we'll also share it over email. This is what the checklist looks like. And if you want to learn the underlying science, you can read the book. Now, you might completely reasonably ask, if one of the principles is less is more, why write a 207-page book about it? Now, the idea is a book has to look like a book. Readers of a book have an expectation for what it looks like. It looks like a book. A one-pager would be insufficient. In everything we write, we're writing for an audience that has expectations, norms, context. You can't write a one-page book. So when you write a book, you can make it easier to skim. You can make it simpler sentences. You can have navigation. You can use formatting, etc. But in the end, you're writing for an audience with expectations. So when I work with organizations, like I was working with one of the intelligence agencies, and they do these intelligence assessments, and they're 70 pages. And the guy is like, if I write a 35-page intelligence assessment, people will think I didn't do my job, right? Because they're normally 70 pages. And so the takeaway for me is you're right. In this case, you have to write for what your audience expects. You can still make it easier to skim. You can still make it easier to pull the key info out. You can still make it, simpler sentences. You can still make it easier to read, but you still have to write for that audience. If you're a leader, though, and you can help reset the norms, you can reset the norms and make it so that shorter is the norm. But if the norm is the norm, you got to take it and you got to conform to what your readers expect. Early on, when GPT-3 came out, we trained a little model, put it up online to edit people's emails, had hundreds of thousands of users, a little tool. And then what we learned as these models became a lot better is that it appears they have just completely metabolized the book. So it already knows everything in the book because it has read it. I think that's awesome for me because I want everyone to be able to write for busy readers. If you care about intellectual property, seems like a different question. But what we now have is you should use a prompt like this because it does these AI tools don't naturally write in a way that is easy for skimming in this style. So use a prompt like this. We'll share this prompt and I'll show you. This is what the prompt looks like. I went to my kid's doctor the other day and they had this thing in the window of the receptionist. And obviously I didn't read it because it's impenetrable. And I'm like, my kid is crying and I'm at the front desk trying to figure out, how I'm paying for things and when we're going to get checked in. And so I took a picture and I transcribed it and then I used that prompt and I asked it like, how would you rewrite this according to these principles? And it would look like this. Will I have a copay? For standard visits, yes. For physical and well visits, usually no. Like, apparently, that is the point of that form. I had no idea that was the point of that form. It is almost certain that the receptionist, despite this picture being on the window, gets asked this question all the time. And I'm sure they say, didn't you read the thing? But if they'd have been written in a way that was easy for skimmers, perhaps they wouldn't have been asked. It would have saved everyone time. It would have made it more effective. So the TLDR is make it easy for readers. How we do that is going to depend on context. But the easier we make it, the more effective we will be, the kinder and more accessible it will be to others. And we'll share this prompt. With that, here's a QR code if you want to get the PDF, the prompt, the slides. And I guess there's probably a link to the book too if you want it. I'm also going to take questions. We're going to be here for the next 12 minutes. So please enter questions in the chat or raise your hand. The QR code does not appear to be working.
Yeah, I'm getting a 404 error from Google.
Okay, well, I'll get that. Well, either way, Erica, you have everyone who registered, right? You have their email?
I don't think so. Some people should have registered through a website, but if they didn't, I would encourage you to. Our
Okay,
yeah.
I'll take questions, and while the questions are coming in,
But I will
I'll get
post to our website if you don't mind sending me the link. I can host it there.
great, and I'll also find a way to get it in the chat. So go ahead. I will actually, Erica, can you moderate the questions if they are in the chat?
Yeah.
Thanks, and I will get the link.
So let's see what's coming up. Yeah, it's asking for a sign in. Any other questions though, while we have Todd here?
Hi, is there any way, thank you for the presentation, it was amazing. Is there any way we can get like a copy of the slides?
Yeah, that's that's on the website, which I will soon be sharing.
Okay, great,
Uh,
thanks.
And but also, um,
I do
if we
find
put
it
there, so
time
we'll be posting it.
consuming to write concisely. It's like you just word vomit and then you have to go back through. So I resonated with that quote that you shared, Todd, the someone smart who, sorry, I didn't have time to write a short letter.
Blaise Pascal. Blaise Pascal, and the idea is, yeah, I'm sorry this letter is so long. I would have written a shorter one if I'd had more time.
Yeah, I love that. I really resonate with that. I have to. Brevity is not my strong suit.
Any other questions? Feel free.
So we have a lot of comments. So lots of
Okay.
thank yous in the chat. Thank you for this presentation. Brenda says, I'm looking to shorten our letters even more based on this information.
Here is, I believe this should be.
I think another opportunity for us to look at, and something that I would encourage all attendees to do, is to look at all those touch points that you have with families. So as you talk about shortening letters, what are your auto dialers saying? Does anyone know? Does anyone know what's on their parents' where if you're using that tool to communicate with parents? I think there's a lot of places where this information can be shared out across your LEAs with everybody that's interfacing with families around student engagement and getting kids to come to school. Todd's dropped the link in the chat, so thank you, Todd, for that. We all anxiously click on it. Perfect. It's working. Any other questions? It's CastWeb. This is not webinar. You can unmute and ask a question or pop it into the chat.
Hi, Erica and Mr. Rogers. How are you? This is Brenda from San Bernardino City. And I want to say that about 3 years ago, we started using the concepts um, that came up for rewriting our truancy letters. And we want to share them even more. But my question is this. Um, I want to know if there has been any rewriting of the actual STAR invite. So whenever we're sending an invitation to have the parents show up to a SARB, those are the letters that I feel we need to revise. And I want to know if there has been any other districts that already use that, or if there's a sample that I may scan.
It's a good question. Can anyone share out if they have SARB short, concise, effective SARB invitation letters that they might be able to share? I know that the Model SARB handbook, Brenda, in part to your question, has not been updated, hasn't been updated, I want to say, since 2018. David can tell us that. Yeah.
Using invitation letters that.
Oh, yes, that's another question. So I recently learned that the manual may have been updated, but I haven't been able to locate it. So that's a good point that you bring up, Erica, about the 2018 version of the SARS handbook. But yeah, that was my question. I wanted to know if anybody has tried it and if I may look at some samples.
And David, were you saying something with regard to those notifications? Oh, nope. So yeah, Brenda, I will email you the link to the most recent SARB handbook, but it is in need of an update. And folks are welcome to email me samples. If there anything they want to share out, we can post on the CASPA website. We have an entire tab dedicated to CWA resources, and there's a list of notifications. We have the attendance works letters linked on there. We have CASPA recommended letters listed there. So we have a number of resources available, and if you send them to me, I'm happy to add to that list of communications. So Elda agrees the notifications are lengthy. I think we all want to make sure we're hitting compulsory ed law, but reminders are short, so that's good. Take it where you can. One question for Todd in terms of stickiness. Yeah.
There are, I mean, some of you are in positions to actually interpret the rules are ambiguous in lots of places. And so a lot of the time it becomes legalistic writing that is very long because of ambiguity about what is actually required. And so sometimes making it clear what is actually required and what is not can actually help people write more effectively. And so in different places, like the not notice of truancy, different districts end up interpreting it differently, what is required to be in it. And I'm not making a legal determination, but when we were working with LA Unified and the Attorney General, that was how the version we came up with. But you need your lawyers to, approve it. But I just say this just, Erica, to just, yes, some things are required, but sometimes the legal default is to include everything, even when it's not required.
Absolutely.
You were gonna add another, Erica, you had read
There were
something.
some questions here. So is there a best recommendation for the format, paper communication versus electronic emails, texts, etc.?
Yeah, when it comes to, I mean, I've studied it in the context of absenteeism reduction. And to everyone's surprise, printed dominates all the digital forms.
Yeah.
And it will not surprise you when you give it half a second of thought, which is that you get flooded with text messages, you get flooded with emails. You don't get that many printed letters from the district or from the state. And even families experiencing homelessness have forwarding addresses because that's where official communications come. They come through the mail. The state, the feds, the school district all send through the mail. And so it's actually surprisingly, it has a really high readership rate. And we find in experiments that it ends up being more effective at reducing absenteeism. And one of the rationales is you interview families afterwards and they report that they treat it like what I call a social artifact, which is they put it on the fridge, they put it on the kitchen counter, they put it on the kid's bed. So people actually end up talking about it. Like, and it's a report saying your kid missed more than their classmates, or your kid has missed 17 days so far. It actually ends up having some survival in the home, whereas digital just sort of disappears. That said, I've done experiments where you try to get kids to do their homework when they didn't do it last night. And if you text the family at 5 p.m., it's way more effective than an email or whatever. Like basically, it depends. The mode of communicating needs to match the purpose. And one of the challenges with attendance is that it happens. We don't know exactly when the kid's going to be absent. And so if we knew they're going to be absent tomorrow, then we might have more timely communications. But it just sort of unfolds over time. And a kid with too many absences who's chronically absent misses one day every 2 weeks. And so the idea is you want to be able to sort of bridge time with things that will stick around in the home.
Yeah, absolutely. Christy shared that they're finding that their families don't check their emails or mailbox. They send both. I think that's the right practice. You have to hit people across all modalities, multiple modalities. And so I think that's the way to do it. And then they do a text reminder closer to the meeting if they're having a SART or SARB. Jennifer's saying, any suggestions for how to get parents to actually show up, like to school-wide meetings?
I mean, Karen Mapp is a mentor and collaborator and friend, and I would like she wrote a book called Beyond the Bake Sale. And the part of it is we want to make sure that we're having them show up for things that are focused on student learning. And often we want them to show up just because we want them to show up in school. And that's great. But like We want to make sure that the things we're asking parents to do are tied to student learning. And effective communication that also is inviting, making it not feel punitive, having parents feel like they have authentic participation in the process. I mean, there's lots of incredible research. I would recommend everything Karen and her collaborators have written. We wrote a piece in, oh shoot, I don't even know, ACSD. I don't know what the name of the magazine is called.
Yeah, yeah.
Karen and I did about absenteeism and family engagement as an absenteeism strategy. And I'll include that in what I send you, Erica.
Thank you. Yep, I'll push it out to
But the
everyone.
idea, yeah, how to get families to show up. I mean, I guess the start, are we sure that it's helping student learning, them showing up? We want their engagement to be tied to student learning, and not just like a test of whether they're willing to step foot in the school. But two, we want to make sure that the school is an inviting place. And now I don't want to speak beyond my expertise.